All right, welcome everyone, and thank you again for joining us today. I'm Matt Atkinson, and I am a Global Project Director here at Reuters Events Pharma. Today's webinar is Hybrid, Go-to-Market Models, Roles and Capabilities for HCP Engagement. And we're going to be discussing the very future of these topics. We have had an amazing response to this webinar with over 2,500 people registering. And as I think it's a testament to the critical nature of this conversation right now. And who would have thought that a year and a half ago, such an unremarkable word as a hybrid would have such a large part to play in pharma's future lexicon and strategy building. But here we are with industry executives working tirelessly to devise and execute a model in which pharma reps and other customer-facing roles balance face-to-face, remote and digital engagement, whilst also considering to what extent the roles themselves must be adopted. And many questions remain unanswered. And so I have had the pleasure of bringing together, along with our partners today, McKinsey & Company, and esteemed guests, panelists, to discuss these very things. And so I would ask that we can do some quick introductions with them now. And I might come first to Janneke, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Janneke van der Kamp, and I have the pleasure to head up Region Europe for Novartis Pharma. And Matt, I think you wanted to know why we are keen to discuss this topic. And for me, you know, while science has progressed a lot over the past decades, you know, our commercial model, our HCP engagement model really has remained relatively stable for those same decades until last year. So I'm very keen to debate with all of you, you know, given those circumstances, you know, what the future will look like and how we will shape that together.
Thank you. Cyril, please.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Great being here. Thank you for having me. I lead MSD across mid-Europe. It's a region of around 30 countries. And why am I passionate of being here today and talking about that topic? Well, I guess it's because I'm passionate about what I do, leading a commercial organization. You know, for me, a commercial organization, I like to think of it as the bridge between the labs and the patients. And as Janneke was just saying, with the speed at which things are changing, science, technology, we need to reinvent that bridge. We need to reinvent how we're working for patients, and that's really exciting.
Thank you, Cyril. George, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm George Kazourakis. I'm working for GSK. My role is heading up GSK's pharmaceuticals and vaccines business across Europe. Why am I here? Definitely, I'm not here as an expert. I'm equally here to share my experiences and learn from the other participants of the panel. And I guess, you know, I'm also here as someone who is part of an organization which is on the journey of evolving our HCP engagement model, which is at the core of what we do. You know, how do we get our science to physicians and how do we get our medicines eventually to patients that need them?
Thank you. Yash.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yash Gautam. I'm a partner from the Brussels office of McKinsey & Company. And at McKinsey, I lead our work on digital and analytics-led HCP engagement. And as part of that, have had the privilege of leading quite a few digital transformations over the past 2-3 years. This is a topic very close to my heart. And, you know, over the last year or so, I think it has been, you know, fascinating to see how digital go-to-market models have, in a way, come to the rescue of many of us in a world where face-to-face access became so challenged. So I'm here to absolutely, you know, share some of the experiences that we have had, but more importantly, also to learn from the other panelists and the participants.
Thank you, Yash. And Brent, please.
Hi, my name is Brent Hooper. I am a partner based here in Europe, one of our co-leaders in our pharmaceuticals and medical products practice, and I lead globally our work in healthcare practitioner engagement. I think that was an exciting topic before the pandemic. I think in the last 18 months, it's become an ever more pressing and exciting and urgent topic, if I can say it as such. And I guess what I'm passionate about that is because at the end of the day, we're all in healthcare for people. and better lives. And this is the final mile of the innovation that starts so early in the value chain. And I'm really keen to see how we can improve patient outcomes and continue to innovate how we bring that to the patients who need it most.
And Christina, please.
Welcome also from my side, everybody. My name is Christina Hoffmann. I'm an associate partner with McKinsey. And as I'm working at McKinsey, I have the privilege to work with many pharma companies and discuss the topic of physician engagement. So I saw how the demand from the physician side is actually changing, but also how slow the industry reacted over the last years. And as Yannick nicely pointed out, that has dramatically changed over the last 12 months. So I'm very excited today to present some of things we are thinking about it and also have this wonderful panel discussion.
Awesome, thank you, and thanks to everyone for that. I want to remind you that this is an interactive webinar, so as we go along, we're going to have polls. Remember to, or please do answer them. We're going to use those answers to discuss as well, and ask any questions you have in the Q&A below or in the chat function as well. I am now going to pass it back over to Brent and Christina for a quick presentation, and then we'll launch into that discussion as well.
Thank you, Matt. We thought we'd begin just by sharing some initial thought starters of what we as McKinsey have seen across the industry and conversations, and also from the research we've been running the past 12 months, a bit as a thought starter before we get into the panel discussion later. And I just want to remind us and also acknowledge at the start, this is a humanitarian crisis we're all living through. And while we have seen some positive steps forward, it's still a very real challenge for many individuals and many communities. So I really think it's important we remind ourselves that all is not resolved yet. At the same time, if we move forward and start to look ahead, I would like to believe that this is an opportunity for the industry, in companies, individuals, all of us to reflect on what we've learned through what we're going through and have gone through. And in many ways, the past 12 months have accelerated things we knew were coming and have changed or amplified things we suspected might be waiting for us. If we start with the patient, healthcare is becoming more digital. It's becoming more like other interactions with professionals. And I just want to draw your attention to the 42%, nearly half of physicians saying that because of the experience in the past 12 months, they've changed their clinical behavior. Some of that will, of course, revert to normal, but some of that may continue. And I think that speaks to improvement areas they've discovered through this period, as well as experiments they've explored. And I think it's important we start there. In turn, their preferences for how they engage with their patients, with one another as peers, and with industry has also evolved significantly. You know, 2/3 of them are starting to reflect on the communication channels they use that best fit their workflow, and realizing that a hybrid or a multi-channel or remote interactions are at times more timely, more effective, and more convenient for them to serve their patients and to deliver their clinical practice. And I think finally, all of this is really setting a new bar for how we as industry engage them. And some of the themes that I think are important there to remember are, number one, the industry pivoted significantly 12 months ago to try and deliver through these new channels, to try and speak to that need. But at the same time, it's an ongoing learning experience, both for the physicians as well as for all of us as well. And we see that 3/4 of physicians still find a mismatch between when and how they're engaged and on the topic, be it new information about new data, or be it a reminder about something they may have forgotten, and all the other many valuable ways we engage with them. So the 3 takeaways I have is that there's an asymmetry of expectations. Different individuals want different things at different times. No longer will a one-size-fit-all model serve physicians. I think that rising bar, we need to think for each interaction, how does this benefit them and their patients? And if we increase both of those, how do we better direct what we're sending to them? I guess on the next page, if I really project myself forward, could we really imagine a world where instead of counting the number of contacts per day or the number of details delivered, we could actually know that we'd gotten to the right physician at the right time with the information they needed for the patient they were seeing that afternoon? If we could get to a place where we didn't just bring them great information in a timely fashion, but in a way that was convenient and conducive to their professional job. Their satisfaction was known to us and was part of the value we bring beyond the fantastic products. I think, and I've already alluded to this, that we knew what works and what doesn't, what's appreciated and what isn't, and when and how and for whom, so that we could better direct resources to what matters. And of course, all of this speaks to how we can really reignite the value that this part of our value chain in the industry brings. So Christina, maybe you'd like to speak on the next page of what this could look like.
Yes, thank you, Brent. So given what we just heard about the changes in the environment that Brent outlined, what are the elements of future go-to-market? We are thinking about this in 4 pillars. The first one being precision engagement. So that's really the point on bringing the right topic to the right physician at the right time. The second is more and better remote interaction. More remote is becoming unavoidable, as we've all seen over the last month, but the industry currently isn't meeting the quality standards across the board. So we need to also be better in how we do it. The third point is, because there is going to be more a mix of face-to-face and remote in the future, we need to get better in a clearer and more coordinated interface versus just sending lots of materials with lots of touch points that don't connect to one another for the physician. And the last pillar being content HCPs care about, that gives us the opportunity to be relevant and interact on regular basis at sufficient depth with physicians. And of course, all of that is going to be supported by technology, data, and analytics. Matt, if we move to the next page, what I would like to spend a few minutes on is going through each of those pillars and bringing them a bit to life and what we really mean. Precision engagement. I said the right content for the right physician. But what does that really mean? It means that we need to have the analytical capabilities to understand which physician responds to what. And that also means that in the go-to-market and in the roles and capabilities that are built in the pharma industry, we need to think about it differently. There's a shift to new roles and more analytical roles that are needed. As we customize that approach and the industry is investing more and more into data and analytics, we'll also learn where it matters to invest, but also maybe where more interactions is not really valued by the physician. For an example, in a brand that's been on the market for a long time and is really well understood, physicians may not have a need to see the industry so often. Now, if we move to the more and better remote interactions, that is really an exciting opportunity for the industry because of 2 things. One, it can help you to increase reach. Remote is a fantastic channel that gives you the opportunity to visit physicians that you haven't really seen a lot in the past, maybe because of the geography or because there was no capacity to see them. But it's also a way to increase frequency with physicians you're seeing on a regular basis. So it can complement the face-to-face channel very nicely and make it convenient for the physician. There will always be physicians who prefer face-to-face, but maybe still not all the time. And at the same time, there are physicians who prefer remote interaction most of the times. Better remote will also require us to be more formalized. And that might mean that we need to think about new roles and even new people and groups. So I see we already moved to the clearer coordinated interface. That is something that a lot of companies today still struggle with. It still happens a lot that a sales rep doesn't even know when another role has been engaging with their physician contacts. And now that we add remote to the mix, it will become more important to have this single quarterback, this single point of contact who curates all the touch points that are happening. And that also means that we are moving away from this one-off touch points, all very disconnected, to journeys and experiences for physicians. And then the last point I want to highlight is the content point. I think everyone is very aware that there is a rising bar for content. And that often means more medical, more scientific content to be relevant. And from a physician point of view, make it worthwhile to spend time with the pharma industry. It also means we need to change the way how we offer content and the formats of content, because the way it is consumed by physician has been changed. It's not just face-to-face and visits and e-detailers anymore. It's often digital. Physician wanted real time, they wanted on demand when they have the time to consume it, and they wanted bit size, so they consume it in an easy way. So there are lots of changes in how we think about providing these content. Now, having said all of that, I hope for most of you these points resonate, but you might think that sounds a bit too easy and maybe how do we really do it? So Matt, if we move to the next page, then I'll hand back to Bren to elaborate on that a bit.
In many ways, this resonates and is exactly the direction many of you have wanted to head for quite some time. Indeed, there's pilots across industry, but there's also a challenge to deliver today's business. And many of these pilots have focused largely on technology or systems only. So we wanted to give some thoughts of what that journey could look like to actually realize all of this. And if we move to the next page, we have a few observations. The first is this must be leadership-led, because yes, we have to protect today's business, but we also need to invest and innovate for tomorrow. And thus we need to push the envelope of how we engage HCPs with our people. It's also a talent question, both building the talent, the people we have, reflecting on the way we coordinate them, and the people we bring in as we continue to renew our talent. Change management can't be overlooked. From a tech side, this does involve technology, but technology is not the only solution. We need to put ourselves not in a from-to mindset, but in a minimally viable product mindset, where we're improving directionally on an ongoing basis towards, and this is the fourth point, it's not digital for digital's sake or go-to-market innovation for go-to-market sake. At the end of the day, this has to drive the business, patient outcomes in the business. So if we're not measuring that and not proving that it works, then our pilots will remain on the periphery. We're not going to scale them because it's nice to have, not core to what we do. And finally, and this bookends the point about leadership, we need to rethink where certain work happens. Some of these activities need to be more local than ever, whereas others will benefit by decentralization or consolidation in centers of excellence or regional or even global functions. Each of these will be difficult questions, and I think that's part of what we'll discuss in the panel now, but we do believe that there's a path ahead and it's worth it to pursue. I'd just like to open up on the thank you for your time, and Matt, maybe I hand back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent, and thanks, Christina. I'm going to come to the audience first and foremost now and launch a poll for you. And this is going to be around what is the most important aspect of your go-to-market model currently. So we have value-driven content, understanding customer profiles and behaviors, ensuring reps have the skills to engage virtually, or ensuring that you have a cross-functional strategy and aligned on delivery. So I'm going to open that up, and then whilst I give you some time to answer that, I want to come to our panelists as well. And George, if I might come to you first, a lot of change there, a lot of change coming down the road, but is it all necessary, or can we afford to continue with the traditional model once lockdowns are lifted?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks for giving me the easy question, to be honest, which I think is a rhetoric one. So the simple and short of it is no. I don't think we can afford to continue with our old traditional model. I think, just to elaborate a bit more, I think customer engagement for pharma was something that was already changing at different speeds in different places before COVID-19. So, you know, if I speak about my own shop within Europe, we've been seeing reduced access in Northern European markets since many, many years now. In contrast, we've seen in Southern Europe still lots of multiple, transactional interactions, but again, the need for new and innovative content and format. And also we've seen, I think many years now, the era of big multiple mirror sales forces being over. So I think, what COVID has done is basically accelerated a change that was already happening. Also, to the point of impact, even before COVID-19, there was already a lot of evidence that confirmed that integrating the rep plus a digital approach was giving the best sales return. And also, as Brent said in his slide, opening up opportunities, not just to reinforce face-to-face where we have access, but also unlock access to physicians that we have difficulty contacting. If I refer to a space that lots of us are working in, and it's the one that a lot of innovation is happening, oncology, these are the most digitally savvy customer groups. And I've seen some recent data showing that more than half of oncologists only want to see reps from the product launch period up to a maximum of 2 years. And of those, 20% only want to see representatives for the first 6 months of the launch. And there is even a small percentage that engage with representatives in the pre-launch phase. Also, we've got new technology, new tools, new systems that enable to adjust and to cater to customer preferences and enable also the industry to change its engagement model. And therefore, what I said before is true, that COVID-19 has only catalyzed these changes. We also have to think, and I'll stop there, that HCPs are also consumers, like we are consumers, and they're shaped by their personal experiences with, smartphones, social media, digital media, and nearly up to 70% of all healthcare providers are now what we call digitally natives. That is, individuals who have grown up under the influence of the internet and other modern information technologies. So, it's normal to accept that healthcare professionals with this profile perceive and understand the world around them differently, and they expect what our McKinsey experts said before, that information is delivered to them through personalized, seamless experiences, regardless of where they are and how they receive it. And obviously, this has significant implications for us in pharma. We need to adopt, and we need to, match and continue to drive improvements in clinical care.
Thanks, George. I'm going to launch our poll results now. So you should see them pop up in front of you. So what is the most important aspect to your go-to-market model? At the front with 37%, understanding customer profiles and behaviors. Next, 31%, ensuring we have a cross-functional strategy and are aligned on delivery. And then we have value-driven content at 19% and ensuring reps have the skills to engage virtually at 14%. Do those results surprise you at all? Or do you think understanding customer profiles and behaviors is perhaps what you would have said, or would you have said something else entirely? And I might let someone just jump in there as well.
And maybe if I jump in, I think understanding customer profiles and behaviors is a must. But to be honest, it's probably one of the easiest that we have to do. I think to George's point, I mean, healthcare today is really grounded in digital, and we need to use digital to deliver a better experience that is going to maximize patient outcomes. So the value realization is critical, and I think the value-driven content is probably one that we need to spend more time on.
Maybe from my perspective, when I saw the poll, I thought, I hope this is one of those where you can click all of the above, right? Because obviously they're all very relevant, and I think that's probably also reflected in the fact that it was, votes for all 4 of them. I think one topic that I feel we haven't talked about at all yet, but is, in my view, probably more important than all these more technical competencies, capabilities, system requirements that have been discussed and that were also in the poll, is of course the psychology of the enormous change that we're asking our people to make. Yes, as George said, of course we have been making small changes over the past years or so, but still on a bigger scale. if you look at the last decades, right, of our commercial model, we haven't really moved the needle until last year, which probably also explains why we were also unprepared. As the McKinsey presentation made clear, we all delivered poor quality. But for me, that factor of you're asking a workforce, whether they're field force or marketing or medical, that has worked in one model for 20, 30 years, we're now asking them to really significantly change. I think we should not underestimate the fear that brings up, right? I've been successful for 20 years in delivering face-to-face calls, or in positioning and messaging, etc. And now all of a sudden I need to become a digital savvy, whatever it is. I think the psychological factor there of accompanying people in being able to actually make that psychological change and move from maybe the fear of, will my job still be there? Can I do this? Will I be fired? To a more open mindset of capability building is really probably the first thing that we absolutely need to address. And if you allow me, since I'm based in Switzerland and I like skiing, I was thinking of a skiing analog here, where, if you're going down a very steep mountain and you're not very comfortable, what you do, or what I do, right, is kind of don't change direction. You go da 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 da. You try to kind of stay, because if you want to turn, you're afraid that you're going to go crash. But if you don't change direction, what will happen is you'll fall off the cliff. So you actually have to take the step and change direction and change what you do to get safely down. And that is what we need to convince our people to do, right? If you're afraid, you don't want to change and you just want to continue. But actually, if you do that, then the thing that you're afraid of, becoming redundant, is going to happen. So you need to get yourself over that and be open and actually, have the courage to make a change, and then you will come down safely, or have a fantastic future in this industry.
Do you have any tips for being able to make people actually make that change, Janneke? Because obviously getting over that fear is massive.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to actually acknowledge it. So sometimes we just tend to jump to, okay, let's throw some capability building programs at our people, let's say. But going down that iceberg, we all know the iceberg model, going down that iceberg with teams, I'm doing it with my own team as well. Because this is not only applying to field force, right? This applies to everybody, it applies to me. Going down the iceberg of actually acknowledging the underlying fear, and only then kind of going back up again on the other side, is probably the first thing that I would advise.
There's something also that digital and data enables us to do that is, it's really getting us closer to our purpose, which is serving patients. Because through digital and data, what our organization in any roles are really understanding is better understanding the patients or the consumers, depending on our products, vaccines, drugs. And that, when you bring this to life with examples, is extremely powerful. And in fact, we've seen over the last 18 months that we've come closer to our purpose, which you would have asked me 2-3 years back, I would have not necessarily said that. And that, I think, is a very important element of the shift of mindset and of the eagerness across the organization of getting through that journey.
Yeah, Matt, just to build on what Cyril and Janneke said, I think also having your leaders in the organization being on board is super important, because it's through them that you are going to drive the change. And I think maybe it's a simple technique, but I think for all of us, it's important to reflect how we think, how we behave, how we perceive the world as consumers, because, healthcare professionals are no different. So if you think it through those lenses, you kind of go, it's crazy to continue things like we were doing in the past. And also it flashes out another fact, which is quite embarrassing, I think, for the whole industry, how inefficient our current model is. How we are kind of, going with a shotgun in the dark and we're trying to maybe hit some birds, but lots of bullets, just go nowhere.
Thanks, George. Brent, I might come to you now. Everybody's looking to make this change. We can see it here and now with how many people are on this webinar. So what's the source of the competitive advantage?
Well, I think we need to distinguish the question of should we do this to how we do this, because on a certain level, the train has left the station in the past few months, if for no other reason than physicians, patients, customers, stakeholders want and expect this. So I think the question then turns to, so how do we do this? And I want to build on what Janneke was saying first, is that it's largely a question of capabilities, building a learning culture that can respond rapidly to opportunities to better serve patients and physicians. That is something that can't be packaged and plugged into any institution anywhere. It needs to be developed within the fabric of how people work together, how they're organized, the incentives in place, the purpose they sense in their day-to-day job. And I think seeing this as a muscle on a journey is the first step towards really being distinctive rather than just, following what's expected. I think the second for me is scale. As others have said, we've been dancing around a lot of these topics for years: patient centricity, customer centricity, digital, new channels. I think what's different this time and what will distinguish different institutions will be their ability to scale it and make it the new way of working, as opposed to something we do on the side somewhere, but it's on the periphery. And I guess the third, technology is important. And as we often say, not all algorithms are created equal. Many of you may play, whether it's Candy Crush or automated chess. We all know there's a difference between the free download of an automatic chess engine on your phone and the best-in-class algorithms that compete at a professional level. And so really thinking, are we truly in this to make a distinctive step, or are we just dabbling around the margins?
I'm interested to talk about that scale part, and I'd perhaps like to hear everybody's opinion on this as well, because I think, or maybe I'll ask it as a question, is there a differentiation in how you would scale and roll out sort of this hybrid go-to-market model based on the market itself? So, and perhaps in a rare disease space versus a highly competitive oncology space, and does that change the way that you approach this and scaling it across company, or do you look at specific markets and target it like that?
No, I guess maybe if Janneke, did you want to jump in? Sorry.
Go ahead, Cyril. Yeah.
It's a question we ask ourselves a lot, and maybe we've spent too much time sometimes trying to do market archetypes and really thinking through that one. What is most critical is really having a very clear view of the opportunity space you want to go after, and that translates into your business opportunity. And then you want to really align your teams on going both after some really big opportunities that are extremely strategic to the organization, and eventually to customers and patients, and probably other opportunities that are less complex and will give you early wins. And then you just get these teams, you empower them, and you get them to experiment, to learn, either stop or scale. And I guess you do this really starting from your business opportunities, more than doing lots of analysis across your various markets.
So
yeah, I think you need to strike the right balance. So, you shouldn't go, I think, too slow, but you shouldn't go too fast either. And, you should avoid also the risk of creating a chaos of pilots. So a bit, to Cyril's point, you need to focus to identify the areas, the high value customer segments, the customer journeys themselves that are more optimizable, if you like, or are more likely to create a, higher impact if they are optimized. then run a pilot. But once you've got evidence and once you've got something which seems to be working, scale up quickly.
I was going to pick up from Cyril, from your current comment on market archetypes, but also what you talked about earlier about, you know, Southern Europe and Northern Europe and the differences in pace of adoption of, you know, face-to-face versus digital. And we're so used, right, to think in market archetypes. And Italy is different than the UK for sure. But within that, there are obviously Gauss curves, right, in both countries. And you have, you know, digital adopters in Italy, and you have doctors who in the UK or the Netherlands or the Nordics who want to see people face to face still. So I think that in itself is a massive change in our thinking, that, you know, it's all about personalization, and the pace is not per se the same in the whole of the UK or the whole of Italy. The pace of change and the amount of change is personal. And that is not what we're used to. We're used to having kind of one model per country in a sense. And we used to have a one size fits all push model that looks maybe different in the UK than it looks in Italy. But now it actually needs to look different for this customer in the UK and this customer in Italy and that customer in Spain. So that is a massive change, right? From one size fits all to personalized pace.
And maybe if I can build on that, right? Because I think this is a very, very important point that I think, you know, Janneke is mentioning, that, you know, I think we will need to, you know, we talked about customer centricity, and Cyril, you know, you framed it very well, that if there has been a moment where we have been living the idea of patient centricity, HCP centricity, I think this is the moment, right? And in that context, I think what you need is, there needs to be modularity and enablement of some of the core enablers that you need across the organization, whether it's content, whether it's the channels, whether it's you know, the orchestration. I think all those things, I think in my opinion, they have to be standardized and made available. Now, how you actually deploy it, that will depend on what does the customer want, and that will be a function of, for example, which market they are sitting in, which therapeutic area you're talking about, and also what their own attitudes and preferences are. And that essentially will drive, you know, what is actually delivered in a personalized manner. And yeah.
Thanks. Yash, I want to stick with you because a massive part of everything that we're talking about now is sort of that data question, and clearly it's necessary, but does the industry need to wait and gather before they can start, or do we have enough data to begin making some of that meaningful change already?
Yeah, I'm super glad you asked this question, because, you know, a lot of the discussions around this topic, they start, and there is a lot of deliberation that happens on the question of, do we have enough data or not? At least based on what we have seen, I think most organizations are actually sitting on a huge amount of data. Is that sufficient? It's never, data is never sufficient. You can always have more, right? You know, is that quality perfect? Again, the answer is no, right? Because, you know, data quality, it improves, and it's a living and breathing mechanism. At the same time, at least, you know, what we have also seen is, in most cases, the existing amount of data and quality of data is good enough to get started. It may not give you 100% of the answer. It may give you a 60-70% of the answer. But I think what is important is you need to get on that journey. And the reason why I say so is because data quality does not improve by itself. When people know how the data that is being collected is going to be used, that becomes a forcing mechanism to drive discipline around improving the data quality. Oftentimes, you know, when organizations work towards their digital transformation, they realize that there is some kind of data that they're not even capturing. But frankly, there are some problems you need to face before you actually go and solve that. And in my mind, data happens to be, you know, in that zone. So I think the short answer is, I don't think one should wait to improve the data quality, because, you know, the availability of data, the quality of data, it's a very evolving frontier. And if you chase that game, there is a risk that you will always be at the lagging end of that. What is more important is to actually get going and then focus on how can you continuously, you know, evolve and improve the data that you have and how you're using it.
I've just seen a couple of questions coming in around that data, because obviously you want that platform, but then the just as important as that next step in terms of its interpretation and then being able to use that in terms of an actionable insight. So I might just pose it to everyone and allow someone to jump in, but where are you guys on your data journey, and are you at that stage where you're using actionable insights, and if you did, how you got there, or how are you hoping to get there? Janneke, I can see you're nodding your head, so I might put you on the spot if that's okay.
Sure. So short answer, yes, we are already using actionable insights, but I agree with Yash. They're for sure not perfect. But I also agree that indeed, if the goalpost will continue to move, right? So you cannot wait until your data is perfect, because by the time you've achieved that, the requirement is already moved on. And there's so much we can do already today with the maybe imperfect data quality that we have, from all the things we just discussed before: valuable content, capability building, psychological safety. So yes, we're already using them, and maybe the main goal today is actually to make sure that we continue on that journey of improving capabilities and mindset and way of working. If we wait now and go back to face, and then in 3 years from now, when we feel our data is good enough, we try to ramp back up again, we've lost massive momentum. So that's maybe for me actually the most important reason, so to just already use what we have today.
Yeah, I'm completely aligned with Yash. We do have some data and some actionable insights, but they're not perfect, and that's fine. Because if you wait for the perfect data set, you'll never start. So I think what you do is you start with a relatively crude set of data, which is probably not at an individual physician level, and then you start building segments, personas, which, as the physicians are getting to engage with us through the different channels, you are making this much richer and much more granular.
Yeah, I think, sounds very familiar what I'm hearing. I think we're really doing good progress when it comes to producing, I would say, analytics that support personalization, relevance, etc. We now start having use cases around predictive data, but there's still work to do. And then the one where it's really interesting is when you start seeing across countries, the teams imagining ways to use data and link behavioral data around our customers with actual real world evidence. So when you look in a certain geography of certain behavioral data, and then you look at what's happening on the vaccines coverage rate, or what's happening in terms of patient origination. And I think that's really the big area that we need to invest a lot with data scientists, but also with our clinicians, is understanding how do we match these two. And that is a challenge also as an industry, because we're working there both with large sets of data and on the other hand with more protocol type generated data. So but that's really where the next few years will enable us to then really come back to the healthcare professionals and provide them extremely valuable insights for them also to deliver better care.
Maybe the one to just also offer a counter perspective, maybe counter even to what I said myself before, but I think the one caveat to using data that are too imperfect is you can actually jeopardize the whole change process as well, right? If the suggestions that come out of your analytics that you either give to your sales reps or launch actions directly towards HCPs with are too bad, then you may alienate actually your own associates from engaging in the process, right? Or it's an excuse for them to say, you know what, didn't want to go in this journey anyway. Now look, the data that you've provided me are crap. So that's a great reason for me to say I'm never going to do this again. So that's the caveat, right? The data need to be of good enough quality to not either, have a negative impact on your associates or on your HCPs.
Maybe, Janneke, just to link that back to your point earlier about mindsets and change management, I think personally, that's why it's so important to involve the end users of the data in the process so they understand what data is being used and how, and can co-create, for example, do you find this useful or not? Give us feedback, help us make it better. Can we test this, and let's jointly look at it and see if it works or doesn't. So it's a process rather than a new system imposed upon them, I think is what ties those two together.
I want to talk about reps and MSLs now, and how are you looking? Do you think they'll look different in the future, say as hybrid roles, remote roles, different activities? Will there be only face-to-face, only virtual reps? What new roles will grow significantly? Is there still a need for, is there still a need for commercial interactions if we are moving to, the medical information side rather than that pull, not push?
Yeah, maybe I go first. To me, the way to address this question is thinking in terms of outcomes. So what needs to be done so that the physician end up prescribing a medicine to a patient that needs it, or the patient that has access to it. And that leads to the other question, which is the best one, the best position to achieve that outcome? And what skills do they have to develop, and how do the ways of working between the different roles and functions have to evolve to foster this famous, cross-functional collaboration and synergies? So, will we need rep roles in the future to close the sale, drive commitment to prescribe, and ensure that action is taken by the prescriber? I think the clear answer to me is yes. That said, the way they will achieve their objective will evolve, as the ones that you could call knowledge seekers are on the rise. Clinical data becomes more important. And on the other hand, the ones which were dominant in the past, the relationship seekers, are decreasing in importance. Also, I think relative to other jobs, the traditional role of the sales rep will not be as important. We've been seeing shift of powers for some time now, from the prescriber into payers. We've been seeing, nurses, pharmacists, and even the empowered patient getting more influence, and therefore the roles in pharma need to adjust and cater for an evolving, more complex world. What that means for sales reps, I can see their role evolving into multi-channel sales reps. And also we can see different specialization of roles with increase in clinical expertise and handling more complexity within stakeholders. I'm not a big believer on digitally only reps or maybe even hybrid reps. I think the best reps are the ones who can flex to customer needs, and that they are empowered and enabled for that. On medical, I think MSLs will continue to be key, with a growing focus on partnerships with external experts, getting insights, gathering insights for the portfolio and the pipeline, putting complex data in context, whereas I can see their role being less and less involved in activities of promotional nature versus their scientific engagement role.
Yeah, maybe to build on that, sorry, what the limit somehow of the questions maybe that McKinsey asked to physicians, and also of the fully and only pool model, is that you ask a customer what they want. They will tell you they need scientific information. They won't tell you that they want to be sold to or to be driven to commitment or action. That's not what they're going to tell you, right? But I'm still fully convinced that our sales reps have played and will continue to play a very important role in going from interest and information to actually taking action. So, we need to be also mindful that asking customers what they want has also its limitations.
I mean, maybe building on what was just said, is I also think the role is going to continue changing and potentially even fundamentally change. Because when we think about it, a few years back, I mean, the main question our sales force were getting, and probably the main one we were training them to answer was, tell me why your product is better and how should I use it? And today, the main question they're getting is, I have a problem, how can you help me solve it? And that problem is usually referring to the patient pathway, the patient care pathway, the patient journey. And this fundamentally changes the role of a customer-facing colleague. And this also changes fundamentally how we work within the organization, where instead of thinking of having marketers and other functions that will serve our sales force to eventually serve the healthcare professionals, you now have an entire organization that is, through teams, focusing on how do I deliver on that question? How do I deliver on that problem? And it's really rechanging also the way our sales force is working with medical, with access, or with marketing, of course. So I think we're going to see more changes in the next few years, and we're going to have jobs that are significantly enhanced. And this also touches on what type of capabilities and competencies customer-facing employees will need.
I think you make a fantastic point, right? Because we, so far in this discussion, have been focusing on a very narrow definition of the role of the pharma industry and of the commercial part of the pharma industry to inform physicians about new medication, answer their questions, and maybe drive them to commitment. But I totally with you that our role should be, and already is, much broader than that, in really supporting physicians also to optimize the way they treat patients, help accelerate patient journeys, and then reduce those massive gaps that we have between diagnosis and treatment, etc. So indeed, that already with us, and I'm sure with other pharma companies, has over the years led to different roles than already just the sales rep and the MSL. There are many other roles that are more focused on support to optimize patient journeys. And indeed, if we take ourselves seriously as partners in the healthcare system, this needs to continue to be and become an even bigger part of what we do.
I want to ask an audience question quickly, and it's been the most popular over the webinar so far, so I would be remiss of me to not ask it to our panelists. It says, how do you measure the effectiveness of remote interactions versus in-person? I thought since we're still talking about the field force to an extent there, it might be worth popping that one in there. And I know that's a hard question to answer, and I'm sure everyone's still trying to understand, so I can see some smiles, but if I can ask somebody, even if they haven't been able to get that answer yet, what they might be doing to try and understand it.
Yeah, I can start and throw out a perspective, and I'm curious to hear what others on the panel think. I believe the simplistic of how much of a face-to-face detail are all these other types of contacts worth is probably not the right question anymore. If I build on some of the other comments that we're moving to journeys, we're thinking about experience, we're trying to become partners, and thus the purpose of each interaction is different. Not every interaction is intended to win a new appropriate patient. The purpose of some interactions is to establish credibility, create a relationship, and earn the right to come back with more content. And thus, the value of that, when measured against that, you can determine, does it lead to a follow-on with more information, with more content? I think in others, you would say, does this give us an opportunity to better understand what they need as information so we can be a better partner? That's, again, a different objective to that. So the way I think about it is we're going to need to move from this is the final sales call and I'm trying to sell a product to a customer, but rather say in each interaction, in the same way other professional services interact with us, be it our financial institutions or otherwise, sometimes it's to educate us, sometimes it's to inform us, sometimes it's to sell to us, sometimes it's to solicit our feedback on their service. And we have to measure the value of that contact relative to the objective we were trying to achieve. But I must say, I'm curious what some of the other panelists think.
I mean,
I think you go, Cyril, you go.
No, maybe in just a short, I think it's extremely important to measure, because it can be very frustrating for teams to convince guys like me who've seen the world through certain indicators of understanding the new indicators, and they're wrestling with leading and lagging indicators. At the same time, I mean, you've just said it, Brent, we now start having really good indicators, and we're able to aggregate what I would call, customer experience indicators, customer engagement indicators, that give us a very good view. What we certainly don't do is try to measure everything and try to look at what's the return on every action. There's no way to do this. And I think we have to move away from the idea that by definition, we think that the face-to-face has a high return and the rest has probably a low return. We have to really rethink completely how to appreciate the entire experience. And then there are also important indicators on our own employee experience, but that we probably don't have time, but that's important.
I just want to reinforce actually what Brent and Cyril said. If you want to measure, you can find lead indicators to measure the impact of the individual call, or you can even run pilots and compare products which are only promoted through face-to-face calls versus products which are only promoted through remote interactions. I think if you dig deep down, what you find is actually all about the experience that a remote interaction or a face-to-face interaction offers, and eventually, to Brent's point, the overall customer journey, what that experience leaves both for the customer and the employee. So it's not about whether it's remote or face-to-face. It's a bit, to your initial question, how good was interaction? What was the content? Did it add value? Did it address questions like Cyril and Yannicka were saying around the patient pathway? It's all about the experience that you offer and the value you add to the physician.
Yeah, I think we are sometimes too focused on quantity, right? I think that's just, I'm saying the same as you said, maybe in different words. Move from counting types of interactions and multiplying by a certain multiplier. We need to think of quality and impact more than just quantitative measures.
And also, I think, in most cases, right, with some of the remote engagements, it's actually much more easier than face-to-face settings to measure the impact if you know what you're measuring. So for example, for an online webinar, right, if you look at the number of participants, the number of questions, the number of times the recording has been replayed, frankly, the amount of information you get on the quality of engagement is not something you would have got if you had the same people, in a conference center sitting with you, right? So I think, and that's where I think, personally, I think the last thought that I would also share is, of course, I think it's important to measure, but at the same time, in my mind, what is more important is to see what we learn and how do we actually test based on that, right? Because if you can see based on your measurement that there is something which is working, something which is not working, how do you actually bring that back to your organization very rapidly, come up with a revised approach and test it out? Because personally, again, even to the data question, if I link back to that, I don't think in my mind, the magic is around getting the perfect answer in one shot with having lost a lot of time. I think the magic in my mind is how do you get to a rapid, good, commonsensical answer that you're willing to put out there, test out and iterate.
Thanks, Yash. We are pretty much up and out of time, but I'm going to give one last comment, and I want to probably link this right back around to where we started, and when Yannicka, you kind of spoke about that mindset shift, and I think, the organisation and getting people on board is as much the issue here as is enabling the new technologies or creating new types of roles. So one last comment from everyone before I allow everyone to leave. What's the biggest mindset shift required, and how are you going to try and do that? In one short sentence, if possible, please. I'll stick
with overcoming the fear.
Cyril?
I'll say, embrace risk, embrace being and doing agile, and focus on understanding the full ecosystem, not only the healthcare professional.
Yash?
I would say, basically learning, right? That to me is the key. Not trying to be perfect, but trying to learn fast.
George?
I guess, it's accepting also something which is different, including different people, different talents, different perspectives, because this is about challenging decades and decades of practice.
And Brent?
I think I would close and say just being so responsive to the feedback from the market, from the individual, that we put ourselves into what do they think, how are they responding, and how can I better serve them?
Brent, Cyril, Yash, Yannicka, George, thank you so much for joining me here today. We've had over 1,200 people join live, which is a fantastic number and a testament to this discussion. I'm sure they've enjoyed it. We've had so many questions and chats come through. I will allow everyone to carry on with their day, but again, thank you so much to everyone for joining and to McKinsey & Company for being our partner in putting this together. I hope everyone has a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.